Okay, good. Everybody can see me in the session here. I want to share this work. These are some of my works right here. I want to talk about this piece in particular, how to break a slave. That's the slave ship right there. We'll back it up so we can see it. This is the piece. There we go. How to break a slave. In this piece right here, as you can see, this is the name of the first slave ship. It's called Jesus of Lubeck with just 2 Ks, but I put the 3 Ks for the KKK. And let me see, waiting for approval. Are you in the session yet, Andrea? Let me see. Let me see. No, go to the session. Go back. People. Post. Chat. Okay. I'm assuming. Yes. Okay, guys, you can see me. So this was the name of the first slave ship in the transatlantic slave trade. It was called Jesus of Lubeck. And this ship right here was also one of the original ships. Isabella, I think that was the ship that Christopher Colombo he sailed over into the Americas to the West. And this chapter right here in the Bible, the first book of Peter, chapter 2, verses 18 through 19, it speaks about how, that slaves should honor their masters and how the slaves should honor their masters and be obedient to their masters. So one of the 3 points for this organization, Sustained Culture Lab, is ethnocide. And for me, like, ethnocide is like the destruction of a culture. So the woman, as I was taught, like, the woman is the first university for every human being because every child has to go through a woman. And right here, the part of destroying the African culture was when they would break the slaves, they would do things like tie the slaves up to horses and send the horses off in opposite directions to instill fear in the slaves. So for me, I took this concept and put it in the Atlantic Ocean, and the slave ships going in opposite directions, and the African woman is chained in between this by her neck, her wrists, and her ankles. And the ships are splitting her apart, and the fetus, the child that she was impregnated with, and the child could represent, it can be not just like a physical child or a baby, but it also, a child can be like just the culture, the African culture that she carried with inside of her. And then the child is like just dangling, and the shocks are just, the blood and the shocks are just waiting to devour. And the shocks can mean the physical shocks in the water, but the shocks can also mean just the people, places, and things, the individuals and institutions that were intricate in making sure that African people lost their language, they lost their religion, that they lost all the aspects of their culture, their music, their nutrition, their diet, their dance, anything that can compose of culture. So this is, I encourage people to like read this scripture, consider this piece right here. Another thing, grab this other piece. This is another piece right here. This piece is titled Ethnocide. And yeah, that's the scripture right there, J. Carr. And I don't think you got to request approval to be inside the thing. I just think maybe it may only take up to 5 people at a time. I'm not sure. But this painting, it's an acrylic painting uh, in a jelly roll pen. It's titled Ethnocide. And as you can see, the blue figure represents law enforcement, but instead of like just leaving this to America, I put Gestapo, which was the name of the Nazis, the Nazi officers who were enforced the Nazi policies against the Jewish people and other non-Aryan people during the Holocaust in Germany with the Nazi Party. And this law enforcement figure is shooting bullets at a hanging African black man. And the ethnocide is written on a black figure, and it's really like representing that the death of the culture, not just the death of the physical person, but the death of the mental and spiritual culture of Africa. And one of the things that they would do when they would hang black men, they would always like castrate them and like or like burn their genitals. And the reason why in a lot of my lynching figures and a lot of figures paintings that I have with African men depiction is that I always like enlarge the genitals, because a lot of the brutality that was done to African descent men in America was done in the name of protecting white women from black men being over sexual or hypersexual, and we were represented when you watch the movie The Birth of the Nation. The African descent man was portrayed as being this hypersexual animalistic creature who had no ability to control himself for his sexual appetite for European descent women. So this is where you see the exaggerated side of the genitals and the flames burning on, and the blood that's draining from the culture or from the man is seeping into the soil. And the soil is producing the cotton, the tobacco, and the sugar. And these in actuality are agricultural crops. But let me hold this up. But these crops right here can be also likened not just to they don't have to be incarcerated to just these physical things, because we know like when you look at an artist like Jean-Michel Basquiat, someone who European art critics in his time critiqued him very negatively at times, but yet and still he is he was a street artist. They were able to grab him from the streets, insert his artistic genius into their established formal art galleries, purchase his paintings for like a few $1,000s, and now today his work is the most Jean-Michel Basquiat is the most profitable artist in the world today, and his paintings sell for hundreds of millions of dollars. So it's just like, not only is it a destruction of a culture, but it's a misappropriation of the culture, with those who don't invent and create the culture oftentimes profit off the blood, sweat, and tears of the African people who produce the culture. And it's a poem right here written on the painting. I don't know if you can see it. I'll bring it close. But the poem, it says, no soul will be spared, no culture will be left to remain. Everyone will be converted into capital. Free thought will be shackled by a systemic chain. All native tongues will be lost. No tears will be shed. For traditions long forgotten, and all of the blood mercilessly bled. Every slave shack is our harem. Any woman or boy we will rape. This is our manifest destiny, to colonize and take. All men are created equal, but they are only 3/5 whole. Our women are not representative of the people to reap the lion's share of all that we stole. No church will be immune from the bomb, no cross not kissed by the lips of our blaze. Children will be flushed down the school to prison pipeline into the irreversible prison industrial complex maze. So that's just like a piece, that I wrote, that I put on this painting right here titled Ethnocide, and it has a lot of like symbolic structure. Anyone has any like questions and stuff like that? I don't know who's still in here or not in the session. But if you're having problems with getting in the session, let me know and I could try to. Somebody texting me now. Let me see. Any questions? Any questions from anyone? Okay, beautiful. Let me go to another piece. This piece right here is titled, I think it's titled, I think it's titled White Supremacy versus Black Self-Destruction. And this piece right here, and all of these paintings were done I've done these within the last month for the quarantine. But this piece right here, just set it right there. This piece right here is it deals with the dichotomy of white and black and the red in the middle. For me, it's like as a black, what has been socially constructed to be a black man in America, and it's different dates that my inspiration as an artist. My inspiration as an artist is just like, that's a good question. My inspiration as an artist is I believe like in love, and I believe that the greatest thing that we can do is to love ourselves, love those who love us, and even to transcend to a space where we can even love those that hate us. But we can't reach this space of love until we engage in truth and reconciliation with ourselves first and foremost. And for me as an artist, I had to go through so many things in life just to love who I am and what makes me unique, and to love myself, and not to put the acceptance of others' opinions and praise before what I would really like to do with myself and my life. So for me, as an artist, my goal is to create works that reflect self-love, love for self, and love for those that hate, and works that causes us to engage in truth and reconciliation, meaning that understanding that truth is relative. So based upon the information that I have, I like to create things that first and foremost causes myself to critically examine things that I have accepted to be absolute truths without examination, and also extend that to others. So when you look at like a painting like this, whereas though for me, how I feel is what has been socially constructed to be a black man in America who were brought here in 1619 and changed to be slaves. I deal with a crude dichotomy of living every day in America. One is that I deal with what has been socially constructed to be white supremacy, right? And with this piece right here, like I deal with white power, white powder, which you're dealing with the 100-to-1. The Federal Sentencing Commission made crack cocaine to be punished 100 more times than white powder. And then after locking up thousands of people, destroying millions of families, they came back and said that it was a racial disparity because more white people were using powder and more blacks, they say, were using hard crack cocaine. And it led to a big disparity in sentencing. So, my life, I deal with this white supremacist, Jim Crow, patriarchy, the made in EIN in America, this the corporate structure of white supremacy. But then also I deal with black self-destruction. And when you look at the black self-destruction, I deal with Bloods versus Crips, GDs. These are gangs or criminal, what law enforcement deemed to be criminal organizations within the African American community. So I have to deal with Bloods versus Crips, gangster disciples versus vice lords, times, black on black gun violence, drug, alcohol abuse, divided by Uncle Tom's and Jeff Koons. So this is Soo Ethnocide. This is like, we deal with destruction of the African culture, but when you're looking at it from this perspective, it's like we're destroying ourselves. Like, say, for instance, in DC, we have a situation where nowadays it's known as gentrification. And gentrification is supposedly is for when those who are of a higher income or higher net worth wealth displace those from a residential location who are low income. But the facts, due to not just slavery, but all of the economic and social terrorism like redlining and, gerrymandering and all the other things that's been put in place that prevented African people in America from owning property and things of this nature, from building intergenerational wealth. These things have led to vast uh, disparities in the accumulation of wealth. So, like, when you look at these statistics right here, for every $100 that European or white people have in America, blacks only have $5.04. This $8 right here is the median net worth of black people in the city of Boston. This 17,150 is like the median national net worth of black families, and for white families is like 117,150. So when we talk about gentrification, when you say like it's about those who have displacing those who don't have them, just due to the history of the social economic terrorism, that has taken place in America after slavery. Blacks, we have less money. So when you had this white flight from the urban cities of America after World War II, and people relocating to the suburbs, white people, blacks were the predominant people in these urban areas like DC and Harlem. And now it's a reverse, and a lot of people being displaced. So for me, as an artist, it's like I deal as an artist who's been socially constructed to be black. I deal with the pressure of all this economic and social weight on my head, and this is the sweat that goes back into the ground or to the ocean, where the souls of the slaves were left at during those that perished during the transit here to America from Africa. And a lot of times it's just it's heavy. It's heavy when racism is real, and you know that white supremacy is real, especially someone like me who was incarcerated in these rural areas, these racist rural counties in America. And I had the chance to, the difference with me is that a lot of people know that it's racist and they may have met racists, but me, I have actually lived for decades inside of institutions where my life and my livelihood and my safety was given to be in the custody of those who are racist and who had no problem letting me know that they were Nazi sympathizing supporters and members of the Ku Klux Klan organization, Aryan Nation, Aryan Brotherhood, Aryan Circle. And so, I had a chance to not just experience racism, but to be in the custody, the direct custody of racists. So I know the weight of that, but then to come, also to the realization that we're also dealing with a situation where us as black men, we kill each other more than anybody else kills us. So just dealing with that dichotomy, it's like suicide and ethnocide all rolled up in one. And it's heavy, so I believe this piece does some justice into creating like a mathematical formula equation that deals with this hardship that I feel like I deal with every day, being what it's socially constructed to be a black man in America. You like to chime in? Right. What we got here? Let me take this. So, all right, in the midst of everything that you went through while you were incarcerated, it's amazing that you were able to still find love as an inspiration. That's a good point that you bring up, Lisa. And now that I'm out here in society, um, it's just amazing to find love anywhere. I see that a lot of people in society who probably never been through a tenth of what I've been through, as far as experiencing hatred, living with hatred, being in the custody of people who hate you, and yet and still we are very uh, creative in using our creativity to remain divided along lines of race. I don't ascribe to race. Does race exist? Yes, because men created it. It's a theory. Do I believe in it? No. Um, though I do, it's a fact that all human beings have different complexions, but the concept of race is something that I don't believe is valid. Though people do come from different geographical locations, and but yet even and still, people who've never been through nothing come from what we call to be white privilege. Um, People who come from wealth and good family status, and they still some of the most hateful people that you could meet. And I'm not saying like they're hateful towards others. A lot of people have self-hatred, and when you're not cultivated to love yourself, and you put the opinions and approval of other people about yourself before your self-appraisal, then it's damn near impossible for you to love yourself or anyone else from a helpful perspective. So this piece right here, forgive me for not being able to remember all the names of these pieces. I think the name of this piece was Orange is the New Black, but don't hold me to that. But this piece right here is like about the 13th Amendment and the First Amendment. It has the slave owner flogging the African slave. And as I say, the dark man or woman in these figures, all the time it don't represent a person. It can't represent the culture. And the misappropriation and exploitation of the culture, as we continue to see today, when you have an individual like a Michael Jordan or a Kanye West, who are two African descent men, were able to have these dope ideas to come up with these tennis shoe ideas. But yet at the end of the day, even though Kanye West and Michael Jordan may make millions of dollars, they're owned by Nikes and Adidas, and they make billions. So, the culture or the African individual is being flogged by the white figure who wears the big hat, and you see that the slave is being forced to pick sugar and cotton, and sugar and cotton are spelled the way they are spelled for on purpose. And this inhumane institution of chattel property slavery, um, supposedly a civil war was fought to end it. And let me see. Do you think black men killing each other more than any race has anything to do with the way others treat black men? And some feeling the need to fight to get what they think is the top alone, no matter what race, instead of guiding our race to flourish together. Um, for me, what I'm doing, I'm looking at an interesting concept right now. This is my particular theory that I'm studying, is that in America, we have a history where for any slight provocation, it could have been allegedly a young boy whistling, a young black boy whistling at a white woman. And as a result of that, this child can be brutally slaughtered, like Emmett Till was. And there's so many instances of that when you go to the Legacy Lynching Memorial in Montgomery, Alabama. You see all of the counties where so many African people were lynched, and they were lynched by like non-law enforcement, non-judicial state agents. So we have a history and a culture in America where citizens, now when you think about race, they were white citizens felt the only way that the best way for them to deal with conflict was to kill black people. So, and being as though that the European descent people in our country are the dominant culture as far as dictating media, money, and tradition and culture, um, I believe that the reason why one of the culprits of high black on black violence is that this is a part of the culture that we inherited from seeing how we were brutalized by non-state members in the South in particular, how they lynched us, how they beat us, how they bombed us in Tulsa, Oklahoma, displaced us in Rosewood, Florida, and many other examples like that. So once we received the opportunity to access weapons and things of that nature, we watch these movies with these cowboys and these Italian mafia gangsters, and the media glorified Al Capone and Lucky Luciano. It glorified individuals such as Billy the Kid, but these individuals were criminals. But they were so glorified in the media, and we were subjected to that domination of the media, that we started to want to emulate the Scarfaces, the Billy the Kids, the Arkansas Bobs, the John Waynes, and the Clint Eastwoods in the Western movies, and the Italian mafia gangsters, and we adopted this violent culture as citizens, inflicting violence and fatality upon other citizens. And the reason why we do it so much to one another is because America still exists in a cruel state of segregation. Even like Washington, D.C., even though the population is 48% what they say black, but the blacks and the whites don't really mingle like that. It's highly segregated. And so by the blacks mostly just being amongst the blacks, then you compound that with the frustration of white supremacy, a feeling of not being able to ascend economically in a society that's capitalist, and tell you that your net worth is equal to your self-worth, and you don't see like you have an opportunity to arise in yourself and your net worth because you're black, and then you're dealing with intergenerational illiteracy and poverty. So all of these things are elements that I believe that lead black men and black people to actualize brutality amongst each other. they really probably don't want to do it to each other, but being as though that they segregated into highly dense populations of intergenerational poverty amongst each other, they really have no one else, man, really to actualize it against. So they just take it out on each other. And so with this piece right here, going back to this, um, after the Civil War, instead of completely abolishing the institution of slavery, what the legislators did was they enacted the 13th Amendment right here, which states that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall be duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. So even though they fought supposedly a bloody civil war about the institution of slavery, slavery was not abolished. It just was transferred to the institution of criminal justice. So after this, this goes back to the Make America Great Again. Whatever that means to Trump, I don't know. I can't put no thoughts in his head, but I wrote a poem. I said, bring back Grand Dragons, KKK, oh silly me. See, they never went away. Make America Great Again. No 19th Amendment. Women forbidden to vote, so Obama could never have the audacity to hope. Resurrect the Confederates. Bring back the lynching robes. Jefferson Davis, John Wilkes Booth, Ghost. So, I mean, like, and this connection of America in the 19th century, America in the 20th and the 21st century, where the institution of slavery was transferred through the 13th Amendment through criminal convictions. So now we have this fallacy now that orange is the new black. So this black man is wearing the orange jumpsuit. This is the slave owner now is the correctional officer. And you have private prison companies. These are the stock tickers for the two major private prison companies. Their share price on the day that I did this piece, which is on April the 1st. You see that the black body now is slaved through prison labor, as Governor Cuomo, whatever his name is in New York, gladly announced to the world that his inmates, his slaves in the state of New York, were making hand sanitizer for the coronavirus, probably at a penny on an hour. And this right here was a image from the Wall Street Journal about how free speech dogma, the First Amendment, failed us in Charlottesville, when you had the racial riot and killing in Charlottesville. And it said First Amendment case law now puts inflexible rules over real needs, writes the city's former mayor. So the irony of this picture, right, I want to bring it close, is that you have a African-American police officer who has been forced to secure a white supremacist rally. So I think like the dichotomy of that, the irony of that is just a powerful imagery, especially when you talk about like the First Amendment, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and this piece right here, this piece right here is a piece that I did from a book that a professor, Dr. Elaine Pagels at Princeton University, she sent me a book by a deceased professor named James Cone, and the book is titled The Lynching Tree and the Cross, or The Cross and the Lynching Tree. And for me, I felt and I still feel like this was me on the day that I was arrested. This is the cover of my autobiography that I wrote. I feel like the system lynched me. I was a child. You can see I was a child in appearance. I was a child in age. I was 16. I could not vote. I could not serve on the jury. I could not serve in a political office. I could not fight in the war. And under civil law, I could not even be held liable for negligence because I would exist as an infant under my guardians. But yet, though, if I made a mistake criminally, and I didn't, in this case, I didn't kill the person that was killed in my case. The government said that I didn't kill the person that was killed in my case. What the government said was that I was with my friend when my friend killed someone. And as a result of me not agreeing to cooperate with the government to prosecute my friend, who they said murdered someone, they took me to trial as an adult at the age of 16 and convicted me under the liability doctrine of felony murder and gave me two indeterminate life sentences of 40 years of life and 20 years of life, and for which I served 22 years in prison. And I feel like, Jim Crow and Willie Lynch uh, put the noose around me. I was crucified to the cross. I put the crown here. Um, in the side of the crown, I put super predator because at that time in the 90s, a professor at Princeton University proffered this theory that, in particular, black boys were these fatherless, godless, and jobless super predators. That society had to be, and this was in the 90s. This is what you call a progressive social sciences at Princeton. And liberal politicians such as Hillary Clinton, who was the first lady at that time, her husband Bill Clinton, current presidential candidate Joe Biden, and others, they bought into this. And as a result, they legislated various criminal uh, bills, criminal justice bills that created this policy known as truth in sentencing laws. And what they did was first in 1994, President Clinton and Joe Biden, who was the senator for the Democrats, and I think in the House was Newt Gingrich. And they bought into the super predator nerve. They signed the 1994 crime bill. They signed the Anti-Terrorism and Death Penalty Act. And as a result of these legislations, um, massive amounts of funding went to states that supported truth and sentencing laws. Many federal prisons were built, new federal prisons. People were given like harsh mandatory minimum sentences, 3 strikes, you're out laws, and these took place in the federal system, and then in the state, and the local, and the city system. So I happened to be a teenager at that time. I got 2 life sentences for this. They said I was with someone that killed someone, and the irony of it was that the person that they alleged in my case, who was charged as being the actual trigger man, once they took me to trial as an aid and abettor and convicted me, they dismissed the charges against him. So he never even went to trial. So for the murder, which I served 22 years for. But anyway, like this was this whole super predator theory. I put the crown right there because they said that Jesus wore the crown of thorns on the cross. So like the super predator narrative is like that's the crown, that's the thorns, and then you have the New York Stock Exchange ticker. The cross is ablaze. You have the money on here. In God we trust. This is a real dollar bill that was cut up, and I put the dollar symbols around this scripture in Ecclesiastes in the Bible, Ecclesiastes chapter 10, verse 19. You go and read that and what it says about money. And these are the stock tickets for the 2 private prison companies, and or private prison corporations who trade publicly on the New York Stock Exchange. So, and this is made in America. This is like one of my monikers, because as I was showing one of my other art pieces, the United States is a federal corporation. Most things are commercial in nature that happen in America. And so when I say made in, EIN, because everything is business and commercial, with the three Ks, and that represents white supremacy and racism. So everything about my situation it wasn't about public safety. It was also about like a lot of corporations um, make money off the prison industry, whether it's from the phone calls, the emails, the visiting, the vending machines in the visiting hall. A lot of corporations make money off incarcerating our children. And you can get a greater return on investment as far as longevity in incarcerating a healthy child than you can as an older person, because you can keep a healthy child if you get a child at the age of 16, and if they are of sound mind and health, you can keep them for 50 years. You can keep them for a long time. So this piece right here is titled "The Lynching Tree and the Cross." And this is the last piece before I pray. They say they're going to extend it. Let me check. I think people are texting me. People are texting me about it. Okay. Just wanted to make sure that everybody was able to get in. Um, so this is the last piece, and I'm gonna go pray before we log out at 8:30. This piece is also an acrylic painting. It's titled "Straw Man," and you see the straw man right here. And it's the straw man has multiple meanings, but uh, this right here, capitis diminutio maxima, is a Roman term inside on the straw man. It means a complete loss of citizenship, of liberty, and rights in a society. And it's a terminology. When you look at uh, the straw man it can be like a fictitious argument, but also it's a terminology known as gaslighting the straw man. So this symbolism right here symbolizes gaslighting the straw man, the person in society who has no rights. This U.S. code right here, if you Google search 28 U.S. code section 3002 15A, then you will see. Yes, I began like about like somebody asked a question, Ruby. I began like about like an hour ago, almost like 30 minutes ago. And when did I begin doing art? Um, I began writing poetry when I was in prison. I started my own publishing company and I published 11 books. So my introduction into the arts was like me writing poetry. And then when I came home, I started doing spoken word poetry. I was released last year on March 21st, 2019, after 22 years. So I've been out now for like a year and a month. And I started out writing poetry when I was like 18 in 1999. And I started doing photo poetry, which I don't have here, but I donated to the raffle. I started doing that. I started doing visual arts in December of last year. I actually started painting last month. So all of these paintings that I have, I've done all of these paintings in 1 month. So this yeah. So this you look this section up, this explains that the United States is a federal corporation. So nobody won't think I'm making this up. You can look this up. This right here, Carrera, is like the etymology for the word, the currency. So that's why this is like the symbol for the euro, the yen, the yuan, the dollar, and this the pound and the euro. So these are like the word currency, and this is like a body of water, right? And the word currency comes from a current. This is why in economics we have the terminology called cash flow, because money is supposed to like always be flowing like a body of water. And this right here, the temple of Juno Moneta, when you look up the etymology of the word money, it comes from this. This was a god that the Romans or the Greeks used to worship, and they created this temple of Juno Moneta where they would go to coin their money, right? So this is why I put this here in God we trust, what we have in our money today. This right here, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 3, is known as the Commerce Clause in the United States Constitution. And when you look this up, through the Commerce Clause is how, when you go here on the painting here, this case is Heart of Atlanta Motel versus United States, 1964. After the U.S. Congress passed the Civil Rights Act, the Supreme Court said that the bill was constitutional not because racism was wrong, right? The Supreme Court said that the bill was constitutional because denying a person the right to stay in a hotel based upon race impacted interstate commerce. So the U.S. Congress has the authority under the Commerce Clause of the U.S. Constitution to pass laws that will stop the interference of commerce. So when you read this case, it tells you that the U.S. Supreme Court had no concern about blacks being mistreated just because of their race. What validated this, what gives Congress the power to attack racism is not that because racism is wrong, but because racism impacts the Commerce Clause, interstate commerce. And when you read this case right here, on the painting right here, this is Santa Clara County versus Southern Pacific Railroad Company, case in 1886. This was the first case where it wasn't inside of the written opinion, but it was in a footnote, the head of a footnote, where the chief justice of the Supreme Court in 1886 wrote that corporations have the same rights as a person. So when you study like the legal history of the United States, in 1886, corporations were given more rights as a people, as persons, before women and black people. So just, some pieces going over, just going over the history. And have I made any art about reparations? Reparations, I believe all of these pieces address reparations in a sense like, because like I said, in order to repair something, it has to be truth and reconciliation. And I believe that these paintings and my artwork brings us to truth. And only once we come to truth from a place of love that we can reconciliate instead of just denying the truth and act like it doesn't exist. And so so I believe like, but what does reparations look like? And reparations is not, for me, I firmly believe that had African American people been left alone after slavery and didn't have to go through like Jim Crow, and we put all our money into the Freedmen Bureau's bank, and that bank was bankrupted. Had we not had to go through all of this economic, social, economical terrorism, the redlining, stopping us from buying property and things of this nature, had we just been allowed to be as human beings and citizens during the Reconstruction era and to be able to buy land and property as everyone else, we would need no reparations. but we wasn't. So even when you look at somewhere like DC, where Georgetown in the 1930s was 30% black, and due to law and policy from the public and private institutions in DC and Georgetown in particular, black people were forced to leave the properties that they were in Georgetown, and they were prevented from buying commercial and residential property in Georgetown. And as a result, today it's estimated that Georgetown has 3,075 homes. The median household value of each home is like 1.3, 1.4 million. And if you multiply that 3,075 homes by 1.3, 1.5 million, you come up with like $4 million of real estate equity. So if you divide that 4 billion up by the 30% of black people who were residing in Georgetown as homeowners, you would come up with like $1.3 billion. So you have $1.3 billion of what could have been intergenerational home equity value, home equity wealth was, it just was inhumanely, immorally taken from black people. And then, you know, people wonder why that you have such concentrated pockets of poverty and gun violence and incarceration and literacy amongst the African American population today in DC in Ward 7 and 8 is because we don't come from Ward 7 and 8. We come from Georgetown. We come from the areas where the Kennedy Center is at, and we were forcefully removed, and we was not compensated for this removal. So I think a lot of times people make the mistake of believing that when those talk about reparations, that we're just talking about slavery. No, we're talking about slavery and all of the economic, social, and economic, political, and social terrorism and hardships that we had to go through as African people in America. How you doing, Camille? And yes, in Boston. In Boston, it said that black people in Boston have a median household net worth of $8. I didn't say that. The Boston Globe said it. You can Google it. The Boston Globe did a thorough research and report. I'm just reciting what the Boston Globe said as an authority. So but we about to end this session at 8:45. I'm gonna pray before they go into the raffle thing. But thanks everyone who came to my art session. You can follow me on Instagram at Halim Flowers. And you know, I look forward to doing more of these virtual art things until this pandemic clears up. And as soon as it's over, I'm definitely going to be having many art shows in DC, LA, San Francisco, New York, and in Boston, as well as Chicago, and hopefully Atlanta. Ruby, you got my name. Look me up. I'm gonna put my email here.